All right, guys, welcome back to the Pocket Mads channel, and welcome back to Meta Monday, the weekly series where we analyze the Pokemon Pocket metagame and keep you guys up to date on everything going on in the competitive world of Pokemon Pocket. However, you might notice today is actually Tuesday. You might notice I'm wearing a hat and that I am kind of sunburned, and that's because I just got back from vacation. So, the plane landed, we got in the car, we drove back home, and immediately I recorded this video. So, I wanted to highlight the results of this past weekend's PMPT number 23 tournament. Almost 500 people came out to compete in the third week of this Paldean Wonders sort of metagame this season per se. The first week that ranked has been out, so it's definitely, there's been a lot that's happened, quite frankly, but I'm really excited to be back. The videos are going to be returning, and like I said, always, or like I always say, to be fair, in these videos, shout out to the moderators, the judge team, the caster team, everybody that makes the tournaments happen. It's definitely pretty awesome, and shout out to all of you guys for playing in the tournaments, especially this one this past weekend. Before we get into the results and the breakdowns of everything that happened at the tournament, you got to go register for this weekend's tournament, PMPT number 24, the Paldean Pinnacle, I guess is what we're calling it. I don't even know if I have this spelled right, so maybe we'll have to change that on the Limitless page, but it's all good. So, this week we have $100 in the prize pool. This is the last week before the next set releases. In fact, we should be getting an announcement of what that next set is going to be sometime this week. We'll have to wait and see, but this should be, I think, the last weekend before like ranked ends and then the new cards come out. I could be wrong about that. I could be totally wrong about that, but we're going to have to just wait and see. But anyway, guys, let's dive right into it. Link to register down in the description below. All right, these are the standings from this past weekend's PMPT number 23 tournament. I'm very excited. You know, the third week of the seasons is typically when things really settle in, but also at the same time, it's where a lot of big surprises happen because things are so settled. It kind of gives a lot of opportunity for things that are just a little bit different to kind of formulate and I guess surprise people. So let's take a look here at the standings as we see Rickle Mimatos from Brazil, 13-1, playing Dark Greninja, gets first place this weekend. We also have Paoletti Jr. Or JR here from Italy, also 13-1. So two absolutely incredible records and two incredible runs. He was playing Mega Altaria and Gourgeist. Love 21 went 12-1. A bunch of people had incredible records this tournament. 12-1, Love 21, and he was playing Altaria and Greninja. So okay, so both of the Altaria decks made it here into top 4, but Dark Greninja was the one that ended up winning. We talk about this all of the time. We'll break it all down a little bit more in the deck lists when we open up the deck list, but Dark Greninja does really well into like other Chingling decks. I'm actually surprised that it beat Altaria and Gourgeist in grand finals, but typically you could win the Chingling battle pretty well because you have Darkrai and you have Rocky Helmets and things like that. So very, very cool. We'd love to see it. And then we had Vayne here from Japan, 11-1-1, playing Mega Steelix and Indeedee. That's right. So Lucky Ice Pops were not banned in this tournament, or I think last week, so we didn't have a tournament last week, but this tournament, Lucky Ice Pop was not banned. And these sort of, tank decks, these stall-based decks, we saw some with Snorlax, we saw, of course, Mega Steelix a bit last season. These are decks that definitely rely pretty heavily on Lucky Ice Pop, and I think right now, with so much Altaria in the metagame, maybe Steelix was actually a pretty decent choice right now. We'll take a look at that deck in just a little bit. Top 4 placement this season here for Mega Steelix. You love to see it, and right below that, we have FGR, Creamy Lotion from the United States, 10-2, playing Mega Gardevoir. So Mega Gardevoir and Mega Steelix both finding their way here very high up in the standings this weekend, which is really, really cool to see. If we go just below them, we have Sophia Declare from Vietnam, 6th place, another Dark Greninja, and then we have 3 Altaria Gourgeists right in a row here, 7th, 8th, and 9th place. That's Kaizo from Germany, Nicer Chili from Chile, and then we have Marky 122 from Australia, all playing Altaria Gourgeist. Again, one of the most consistent decks in the entire game right now. What I'm noticing right off the bat about these standings is not a whole lot of Magnezone or Bellibolt or Choreo, and I think this actually does make a little bit of sense, considering, how many of these decks, like Steelix per se, but how many of these are like our Altaria and Gourgeist, which actually is a pretty good matchup into Oricorio deck. So very interesting. Below these 3 players, we have Froggy X Wawan from France, 10th place, Altaria Greninja. So tons of Altaria in the standings. Definitely just sort of the best overall Pokemon, I would say, in the game for quite some time now. I don't remember the last time Altaria got first place at a tournament, but very impressive just results here for Altaria across the board, whether it's Altaria, Gourgeist, or Greninja, because below these three, we have Altaria, Greninja, 4 different players here, and then in 11th place here, testing 444 from the United States, was playing Suicune back Excalibur. So Suicune did kind of slide in here to top 16, and then the next one is actually in 17th place. So only one Suicune in top 16, but we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 different Altaria decks in top 16. So if you were wondering, who runs the Pokemon Pocket metagame right now, it's definitely sort of becoming like the Altaria metagame, which it has been for quite some time. I think Altaria and all of the Pokemon, like the whole package that you pair with Altaria, like really is sort of just the best, like whole thing. It's like the best package in Pokemon Pocket. And I think we kind of see that reflected not only right now, but like in the last 3 or 4 months or so. However, since Altaria's been released, it's been very, very strong. Chingling just happens to be one of the best Pokemon of all time, and Altaria pairs really well with Chingling. If we go down here, we do see some Magnezone Bellibolts. So they kind of fell. There was one here in top 16 PGX, Gaizquita from Spain. We had a Hydreigon here in 20th place, Pam Nardo, and then a lot more Magnezone. There was actually a Magnezone Silvally deck here. Here comes Houndstone. So OG Red from the US, 25th place. That's the highest placing matchup here, or I guess deck for the Houndstone archetype. And then we had some Turbo Bellibolts down here. So definitely looks like Altaria kind of swept through the metagame, and a couple of maybe interesting like anti-meta strategies found their way pretty high up in the standings, being things like Steelix and then Gardevoir. These are 2 of the Mega Pokemon that I think are pretty high up in viability. Like, I don't know if we even mentioned Steelix on our tier list last week, but I think Mega Steelix is honestly like always a good option, especially when Altaria is popular. And Gardevoir has been quite good ever since Hydreigon started to see less play. I don't know how many people played either of these decks, but I would think that both Steelix and Gardevoir are actually pretty well positioned in the metagame right now. It's a little bit hard to justify playing Gardevoir because Altaria is also Psychic type, and it's just a little bit better, I think most people would consider, but Gardevoir is not bad at all. It's actually been a pretty strong deck since it was released. Unfortunately, last season there was just a lot of Hydreigon. And if we go down here, again, shout out to all these players here, the Turbo Bellibolt, the Magnezone Bellibolts, the Houndstone deck right here. Nothing too surprising. Another Gardevoir at 39th place. We did actually have a Jolteon deck, My Diamonds 1000. I think My Diamonds is always playing Jolteon. I don't know if that's correct, but that's my feeling here. He gets 43rd place. I don't know how many people were in Top Cut. We did have a Venusaur here at 57th place and a Mimikyu at 64th place, so pretty cool. I would say that, again, most of the metagame is pretty figured out at this point. Let's break down the deck lists, though, and see if anything really jumps out at us. Here is the number 1 deck of the tournament. Raquel from Brazil here, 13-1, although him and Paletti, both from Italy, both had 13-1 records. So I know people are going to take a look at this and think, well, like, this is the first place deck. It beat, Paletti in grand finals, but they both went 13-1, which is effectively the same record. So let's take a look. Congrats to both these players here. And this is Dark Greninja getting first place. I think Dark Greninja has been on an absolute tear. It's been winning so many tournaments over the last like week or 2 weeks. It's just been a really, really strong deck ever since. I don't even know like what really changed for Greninja. It was a deck that was actually quite good into Altaria specifically and Altaria Greninja specifically, which I think ended up being probably one of the strongest decks this season early on. And ever since then, a lot of people have been playing Dark Greninja, and it's been winning a lot. And after getting first place this weekend, I think it'll become even more popular. But nothing really jumps out as surprising to me. This is very standard as far as, the deck lists that people are playing. In fact, I might have actually showcased this exact 20-card list on Friday when I did my best decks for ranked video. I really like Dark Greninja. Again, we'll take a look at the data at the end of the video, but I really think at this point, it's just very well positioned into the other top meta decks. And again, I think a big reason for that is that we have Chingling, which is just a card that beats so many other things in the game. And you might think, well, a lot of other decks are also playing Chingling, but we're playing Darkrai and Rocky Helmet. So when you combine the damage from Darkrai and Rocky Helmet with Chingling, that means that you can actually one-hit KO your opponent's Chinglings, which means that for the most part, we win the Chingling versus Chingling battle, which means we get our Greninja out before our opponent does. And it just makes a lot of different matchups a lot better, specifically against like Altaria Greninja, but also just really any other deck that might be playing Rare Candy. So shout out to Dark Greninja, very, very strong deck. I like the one inflatable boat, like I said last week, because of the Froakie lead. This deck list is actually playing double Rare Candy and double Greninja, so they're not actually playing any any Frogadier. So some of the decks were playing one Frogadier, one rare candy to, again, kind of alleviate some of the stress of going up against your opponent's Chingling. But this deck just sort of rolled with double rare candy, which is very admirable, and I think it's totally fine. I've said so many times, like, playing the middle evolution really is not helpful into Chingling unless you get it on your second turn, right? Because then it just doesn't matter. And this is a deck that can kind of win the Chingling battle pretty well anyway, so I don't really think the middle evolution is that needed, quite frankly, but yeah, I mean, the deck does rely on the double research, double copycat to draw cards. The red card in here is pretty cool. I don't know if this was it highlighted in our video before, but I do love a red card. It pairs well with Chingling, pairs very well with Copycat. I think that this is just an absolutely awesome deck. I used to call this high roll control because it really is like a high roll deck, but it's like a control based deck. It's not really like a combo heavy deck. It's not dealing like a ton of damage. It's very much more like a control-based deck, which is pretty cool for Pokemon Pocket, and been very good. Second place here, Paoletti, is Altaria Gourgeist here. Let's see if anything surprises us. Well, I guess I don't know if this is that surprising. There might be a few more Pokemon than normal. Like, I think typically you play double Altaria, double Gourgeist, and double Chingling. I don't know if you also sometimes play Jirachi, or at least commonly. I can't remember, honestly, but I think that this is a fairly standard list. Training Arena with Altaria goes well, also works with Gourgeist. So yeah, I mean, I like this deck list here. Again, I think Altaria is just super consistent, and the Gourgeist really does kind of flip the Magnezone and the Oricorio matchups completely on its head, because it's like, you go from being like almost never able to beat Oricorio if you're not playing Gourgeist to having a very good matchup into Oricorio if you are playing Gourgeist. So we see a lot of decks play Gourgeist because it's in general just a good card. It's 70 damage for 1 energy on a stage 1 Pokemon. And that's 80 with Training Arena, 110 HP. It's just a good card, quite frankly. And again, it makes the Oricorio matchup so much better. So if you're not playing like high roll Altaria with Greninja, this is the deck list you play. Nothing too surprising here, but I love it. So shout out to Altaria Gourgeist. Definitely the most consistent, like, strong deck in the game right now. Just sort of always does what it wants to do, which is really cool. We have Altaria Greninja in third place. This is the other way that you play Altaria, which is similar to like Dark Greninja. They are actually playing the one Frogadier, one rare candy, which I actually think is more smart for Altaria Greninja than it is for Dark Greninja, because again, you struggle a little bit more in the head-to-head Chingling battle because they're playing Darkrai and they're playing Rocky Helmets, whereas we're not. So your Chingling is going to go down before theirs, and then you kind of get locked out of your Greninja, which means you're just not really going to win the game most of the time. So I like the one middle evolution in this deck list. Very similar deck. Like, the composition of this deck, you are playing Training Arena because you're playing Altaria, whereas Dark Greninja doesn't need to. But we have Cyrus as the win condition with Greninja. We have Copycat Researches, or like the 1/1 Lissia Pokeball stuff is all pretty standard here, so nothing too surprising. This player though was playing the one rare candy, one Frogadier. I'm actually curious what the matchups were. Yeah, so Altaria Greninja ended up losing to Dark Greninja in top 4, which is very much like the case you would suspect. Like, you know what I mean? This is a deck that kind of beats, like, Altaria Greninja beats most things in the game, can struggle a little bit with Oricorio, but definitely loses to Dark Greninja. Dark Greninja really is sort of a counter meta deck specifically for Altaria and Greninja, but I would say that Altaria Greninja is the overall strongest deck right now, even though there was a lot more Altaria Gourgeist. I think that's mainly just because of Dark Greninja's popularity this weekend. Vayne, 4th place from Japan. This is Mega Steelix and Indeedee. I don't know how different this is going to be from the decks that we saw last season. I just don't think anything new came out in Paldean Wonders that you would really play in this deck list. We have Heavy Helmet, Lucky Ice Pops, the Indeedee combo with Mega Steelix, Brock to accelerate energies, 2 Onyx. It's a really solid deck list. You could play Orthworm in this deck, but I personally think that kind of ruins some of the prize math because you don't really want to play Orthworm and Indeedee, because that means that your opponent can then kind of go through 2 Pokemon a little bit more easily than having to basically force them to go through at least 1 Mega Steelix. In fact, most decks that we see right now in the metagame are only playing 1 Cyrus, and I find that to be very interesting, but I think it also makes a lot of sense considering there's really not that much hand disruption in the metagame right now. That's one thing that I'm really noticing. The number 1 placing deck did play Red Card, and I do think hand disruption is very good. It's just not that common in the game right now, so I think that you could play just 1 Cyrus in your deck and be totally fine. This deck plays double Ice Pops and 1 Pokemon Center Lady, which I also think is kind of smart, just quite frankly. I think that, like, not that there's any other real supporter card to heal Mega Steelix, because it's not a stage 2 Pokemon. And I honestly do think that there's definitely some status conditions in the metagame right now. Like, there's a lot of Swablues that'll put you to sleep. Probably some other stuff that I'm forgetting about, quite frankly. But yeah, Pokemon Center Lady on top of like an Ice Pop heal is going to go nuts. So, Mega Steelix does only 120 damage, but that's mostly enough to 2-hit KO anything in the the game. And that in its own right would be fine. But the 4 energy attack cost for Mega Steelix is what makes it kind of tough. But it's kind of okay because with, again, 220 HP, Lucky Ice Pops, and Heavy Helmets, again, Heavy Helmet does work for Onix, and it's got 100 HP, right? So, like, theoretically speaking, even if it takes a long time to get into Mega Steelix, like, it's totally fine because it's so tanky. This is definitely a deck that relies on flipping heads with Lucky Ice Pop, but as we know, that certainly can happen sometimes, and if it does happen quite a bit, this is a deck that's virtually unbeatable. I will say that sometimes you just don't draw Mega Steelix, which means that you lose the game. And you'll notice, like, this deck is only playing 2 research, 2 Pokeball, but only 1 copycat, right? So, like, there's just not, if we had like a way to like bake in a nice draw engine into this Mega Steelix deck, I think it would be pretty significant. Mainly just because that's the only downside to this deck is sometimes you just don't really draw the cards you need. Obviously, leading Indeedee is not ideal, but if an Indeedee goes down, it's kind of like whatever, you know. It's typically fine for the most part. Yeah, I mean, Starting Plains is a really nice card here. It brings Indeedee up to 150, but it also brings Onix up to 120 plus Heavy Helmet. So you have to hit for like 140 to KO this thing, which most Pokemon really can't. I guess Altaria can with Draining Arena, but it's definitely a pretty good number to have here. But yeah, that's sort of the big stretch with this deck. You can deal with Oricorio very easily as well because of you just keep an Onix in and then you can live a hit from basically anything. So this is a really good deck. It's one of those strategies that I think most people just don't really choose to play, mostly in ranked because of how like slow and grindy the games can be. The Snorlax deck was very similar, but it just can't beat Oricorio, which is why the Steelix deck typically does more, like has more results in tournament play, at least higher results, I would imagine. But yeah, so a really, really fun deck. Shout out to Steelix. I wonder if those decks will become more popular. They have all of the tools in the game. Like that's not even a deck playing like Metalcore Barrier. It just plays Heavy Helmet, but like we have Indeedees, we have Ice Pops, we have a lot of damage reduction cards in the game. We saw some Skarmory in previous weeks. I think that the stall-based decks, the tank decks, are actually really decent in Pokemon Pocket. They're just kind of annoying in general. But 5th place is Creamy Lotion Gardevoir, Mega Gardevoir. And again, very disrespected. I just don't think Mega Gardevoir ever got off to a good start last season when it got released, and that's because of Hydreigon and how popular it was last season. But I think right now, if you take a look at the overall scope of the metagame, you probably feel pretty decent about Mega Gardevoir. You know, like there's not really any dark type decks. Hydreigon seeing a little bit of play, maybe not as good for ranked because I imagine more people are playing Hydreigon in ranked, but for tournament play, not a ton of Hydreigon. I guess we'll check at the end of this, towards the end of this video when we take a look at the data. But yeah, I mean, Mega Gardevoir and then Diantha, they even have a Lucky Ice Pop in here as well. It's just a pretty decent strategy. Like we talked about how Steelix does 120. Like 120 damage like really isn't good because you're not one at killing like virtually anything. But Gardevoir is in the exact same boat. And the whole concept of Mega Gardevoir and Mega Steelix are actually very, very similar. They're just to live additional turns so that even though we're not one at killing most Pokemon, in matches where we're going to be 2-hit KOing anyway, it's actually a little bit better, right? So 210 HP, but Diantha heals for, is it 90? 90 damage is crazy to heal off of a 210 HP Pokemon. That's just the reality of it. It makes it so that if you go back-to-back Diantha, like you're just able to kind of like waltz through your opponent. Gardevoir is not bad at all. Not a lot of Charizard, I would imagine. But if there's a lot of Steelix and there's a lot of Gardevoir and stuff, then maybe you play Charizard, you know? That's why Charizard is in the game. Mega Charizard is to be able to beat decks like these, like Gardevoir, like Steelix, because they definitely do just sort of have advantages in the matchups, right? Or in certain matchups in the metagame. So it's interesting. It's like a whole other side of the meta that not as many people play. Most people just sort of choose to play these like explosive high roll decks that like have the potential to just kind of get set up on like turn 2 and just start hitting for a lot of damage. Decks like Mega Gardevoir and Mega Steelix are slower decks that, again, don't deal a ton of damage, but they have sustain. Like, they're like sustain type decks. So it's like a whole other archetype to Pokemon Pocket that I think specifically right now in the metagame is actually pretty strong. Just a lot of decks that aren't dealing a ton of damage. Like, other than Altaria, like Dark Greninja can never hit for that much damage in one turn at least. Like Suicune Excalibur can never hit for that much damage. Magnezone, like Bellibolt maybe. So like everything caps out at about like 140, 150, like if you're Bellibolt, right? So which means that even like with Mega Gardevoir and you heal for 90, like they're not like they can't 2-hit KO you. You know what I mean? I guess with Gardevoir specifically, they can, because that's if they hit for 150 twice, because that's 90. But we do have Lucky Ice Pop in here. So that 150 number times 2 is probably a little bit specific. But for the most part, 140, I would say, is like the kind of the high point of damage, especially with Altaria in the metagame. which means that Gardevoir is perfectly living 2 hits, right? That's sort of the whole design of the deck, and Mega Steelix and Indeedee are kind of the same. So it's interesting, right? It's a cool development. These are decks both that I think deserve to see more play, just definitely really cool. There's so many strong cards in the game. Let's go down all the way to testing 444 from the United States, 11th place. This is the highest Suicune and Baxcalibur deck list. I'd be really curious to see how well this archetype performed this weekend. I kind of mentioned last week a bit that this deck was becoming a bit more fraudulent as time went on, just because a lot of the other decks that people were playing, it just happened to actually be strong into Suicune and Baxcalibur. But don't get me wrong, this is a very, very, very strong deck list, and it had very significant matchup spreads into popular decks of last season, which is why I think at the beginning of the season it was so strong. But we were 3 weeks in at this point. The counter meta already had time to develop, and as we see right now, the entire metagame is based around the counter meta development of Suicune and Baxcalibur. That's what happens. That's exactly what happened. As we know, Suicune Baxcalibur did really well into Hydreigon, kind of took it off the face of the earth early this season, dominated for like the first week, and then the counter meta developed around Suicune and Baxcalibur. And I think that's sort of still the meta that we live in right now. This is definitely still a gatekeeper deck. It's going to beat basically anything other than the other top decks of the metagame because it is really strong. It's a really good deck. Suicune draws double cards. Chian-Pao's 130 to the bench. Baxcalibur high roll does mean that even going first, Suicune can attack on turn 2. You can deal with Oricorio pretty easily with Baxcalibur. It's not even weak to lightning type. This is a very strong deck list. It really is. It's just tough because all of these Pokemon here can get KO'd like fairly easily. And if you go first, of course, Suicune's never that great, although Baxcalibur can fix that problem. But this deck list is pretty standard. 1 Cyrus, 1 Sabrina, which I do love. Like the one thing I love about Chian-Pao is that we can play Sabrina in the deck list, and I love Sabrina. I think it's super, super good in so many different matchups, especially in the early game. And being able to play Chian-Pao means that we don't need double Cyrus. Like, you know, like you could just kind of get away with not even playing any Cyrus potentially. So Irida, Mars, Cyrus, and Sabrina, I absolutely love it. It's like one of the biggest advantages right now of like the Chian-Pao strategy. We are playing 1 inflatable boat in case we do lead Chian-Pao or Frigibax. They both have a retreat cost of 1, so inflatable boat is relevant. And then of course starting planes to give Suicune, Cape plus starting planes is 180 HP on Suicune, kind of ridiculous. But it's crazy that even after all of these buffs to Suicune, it's still not really a top tier deck in the metagame right now, which is very surprising, but that's where we're at. And again, the biggest sort of glaring thing to take a look at here is the, really the absence of all of these lightning type decks very high up in the standings. And again, the meta is sort of now developing around to kind of beating these Magnezone decks, or at least being able to compete against the Magnezone Oricorio stuff, because Magnezone Oricorio and Bellibolt really was sort of the strongest deck this season in terms of its overall matchup spreads. A couple of things specifically can beat it, as we're seeing here at the top of the standings, but definitely just one of the craziest decks of all time, quite frankly. Bellibolt is incredible. Let's take a look, though, at the #1 Magnezone deck. This is PGX Gaze Kaida. The names are crazy. You guys have some insane names. But he's from Spain, 16th place. And this is the last deck that we'll take a look at here. And this is Magnezone Oricorio, but with Bellibolt. And this is just like the new development of like a lightning type decks right now. It's interesting. I think that it took a little bit of time for people to realize that, we had this new Bellibolt archetype. And then, of course, we had Magnezone Oricorio before. And you just wouldn't think that those two could kind of combine and be really good. But it really was like that easy. It was like, hey, just play 1 Bellibolt in your deck. And, now we can hit for 140 and just sort of win games that way. A really big deal. Mesa Ghost is sighting, which is always pretty fun to see. And we are playing a Lucky Ice Pop, double giant capes in here. So it is kind of just sort of the new upgraded Magnezone package with Clement. And then, of course, you can play Lycia with the 50 HP Magnemite. All really, really big deals here. It's also going to grab Tadbulb, which is just huge. So again, like a lot of these improvements to the Lightning archetype have been very significant. I would say going into this third week, Magnezone and Bellibolt was probably like the #1 most successful deck list. Again, we'll have to see what the data shows, but no surprise to me that basically every deck high up in the standings is somewhat, decent into this whole strategy. And again, like even if you have just one Pokemon that you don't mind like putting in the active just to KO an Oricorio, goes a very, very long way. And as we know, Altaria has that with Gourgeist, right? So that makes that matchup like infinitely more easy. Because Altaria's not getting one hit KO'd by any of this stuff, right? Which just means that you can kind of go Gourgeist, get rid of the Oricorio, put some pressure, maybe KO a Magnemite or a Tadbulb early. And then even if Gourgeist goes down, then you just go into Altaria and you can probably sweep the game from there. there as long as you're able to KO the Oricorio. So it's very relevant. It makes that matchup a whole lot easier, but this is still one of just honestly, this might be one of the best decks we've ever had. This is a deck that just does it all. It really does. Like, it's got healing. It's got just like HP boosting. We got a ton of card search between Lycia and Clement. We have, we could throw a Cyrus in here. We have, Mirror Shot Magnezone to stall out and just sort of RNG out games. We have Oricorio to just wall certain things, and then Bellibolt to just one-hit KO stuff at 150 damage, or 140, I guess, in this deck, which is crazy. So this really is like one of the more insane decks we've ever had. Yeah, there it is. That's the standings this week. And again, we'll break down some of the more lesser played, like kind of surprising decks like Venusaur, Jolteon, Mimikyu. We'll break that all down probably in tomorrow's video, like we typically do on Wednesday. But for now, what I want to do is shift on over to the metagame data for the last 5 or 10 minutes of this video. So if you made it this far, shout out to you. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And let's break down what really happened. Again, I always mention it, but the standings, they're important. Like, everybody takes a look at the decks and what deck, won the tournament and whatnot, but the metagame data, the win rates, the matchup spreads, all of that, that's stuff that really tells the whole story. I say that every week, but it's the truth. All right, let's get into it. Okay, so very interesting results here. Very, very, very interesting results. Okay. So Altaria Gourgeist was the most played deck at 14.5% meta share, and it had a 53.5% win rate. So very, very good performance here for Altaria and Gourgeist. Suicune Excalibur, still the second most played deck here at just under 14% meta share, but kind of struggled a little bit, 47.5% win rate. Magnezone Bellibolt definitely dropping a little bit in play, although maybe all of these decks are just sort of evening out. What's very, very surprising to me right off the bat is that we have 4 different decks that are between 10 and 15% meta share. I don't know if we've ever seen that. I don't remember ever seeing that sort of level of distribution. Basically, it means that the metagame is extremely top heavy, but not top heavy in the way that you might think, right? So normally, especially late in seasons, about 30 to 40%, or maybe even 40 to 50% of the metagame is really divided amongst the top decks. But typically what that means is that you'll get like 25% meta share of like the number 1 deck, and then like 10 or 15% meta share of like maybe one deck that's strong against the number 1 deck. So it's sort of like a two-faced metagame, and then you might have like a third option, which is kind of niche, but floating just below that. This is crazy that like the 4th most played deck has an 11% meta share, and the number 1 most played deck has a 14% meta share. So that's like literally like 50% of the tournament was playing just these 4 decks, which is absolutely insane. Even Dark Greninja here, which ended up literally winning the tournament, had a 52, almost 53% win rate, got first place in the tournament, was 8% almost. So like that's pretty significant. And then Hydreigon was 6%, Turbo Belly was 5.5%, and then a massive drop off, right? So it's like, very, very interesting. Again, we're like 3 weeks into this meta, so things are definitely developed, but like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So really there's like 7. I guess you could maybe count Houndstone as like the fringe meta deck. 8 different decks are effectively taking up like the entirety of the metagame. And I know there's some niche options here. Like if we go down, because we did see Gardevoir, so only 4 people played Gardevoir this tournament, and it had a 70% win rate because of that one player, I think. It went 23-9, which is crazy. And if we go down, like where's Mega Steelix? 2 people played Mega Steelix, went 12-4. So like these are decks that definitely deserve to see more play, especially moving forward. Like they're strong options. They're just not popular right now. And again, that's sort of what happens is like the popular decks sort of, we did actually put Gardevoir as our weekly wildcard on Friday because it had been doing well. So it's like not even that big of a surprise that it did do well. But I think it definitely deserves to see more play. Steelix is not something I really expected. Only 2 people played it, but it kind of popped off. Look at that. 71% win rate, 12-4. Absolutely incredible record for Steelix. And yeah, so that's fun to see. Let's see. So yeah, okay. So Altaria and Greninja actually did phenomenally well. Had a 57% win rate almost at 11% meta share, which is pretty dominant. 187 to 134. So that's a pretty big deal. Hydreigon struggled. Turbo Bellibolt struggled. These are decks that just don't play Chingling or Oricorio. Like that's sort of the reality, I think, of the metagame right now is like if you're not playing Chingling or Oricorio, or I guess if you're just like a tanky stall deck, like you just can't really compete against some of these decks. Like Suicune Excalibur struggled, Magnezone Oricorio struggled pretty heavily, but again, so much Gourgeist that does make sense. Yeah, Hydreigon, Turbo Bellibolt struggled. Even like Houndstone didn't do very well. So again, like I think, what is this? Oh, Mega Lopunny went 2-14. Yeah, I don't think Mega Lopunny is very good into like a very psychic heavy metagame right now. But very interesting, I guess, nonetheless. Obstagoon kind of struggled. Let's see, yeah. So Ninetales didn't do very well either. That's kind of, you know, I mean, these are small sample sizes, so you can't really take too much from it. Jolteon did pretty well, so shout out to Jolteon. Melmetal went 8-6. Shout out to Melmetal, I love that. Anything else is surprising? We can actually filter by win rate. So as we see, Steelix was number 1. This Magnezone and Silvally deck placed well here. So this is 24th place. Let me actually just take a little peek at this deck real quick. Okay, so it's Magcoria with like a 2/2 Silvally line thrown in here. This is an interesting deck. I don't know if I put too much stock into that. I'll pull that back up in case you wanted to take a look at that. I wouldn't put too much faith in a deck like this, but it's pretty cool. I love Silvally. I miss Silvally so much. I wish more people played it. But anyway, that's very interesting. Let's filter by win rate again. Gardevoir did well. Like the one Venusaur player went 6-3, so shout out to Venusaur. Yeah, like nothing else really jumps out here. So those were like the only individual standouts. Steelix, Gardevoir, Magnezone, Silvally, and then the Venusaur player that went 6-3. So again, like most of those are stall decks. Like Steelix, Venusaur, and Gardevoir are all like kind of tanky, like sustained build decks. So again, something that I think actually makes a lot of sense given the current state of the metagame. Yeah, very interesting stuff here. I do just want to check on Dark Greninja specifically, because this is what surprises me a little bit, is like how well performing this deck is into so many top decks. So 3-0 into Gardevoir, 5-1 into Houndstone, 50-50 into Hydreigon is kind of crazy considering you're playing Chingling, but anyway. Good into Turbo Bellibolt, even into itself, of course. It's actually has a winning record into Magnezone or Ikoria, which is crazy, but I guess Darkrai, Rocky Helmet, Greninja will do that to you. Lost a little bit here to Suicune Excalibur and also Altaria Gourgeist. So kind of crazy, but only 17 and 15 into Altaria Greninja. That's very surprising to me because this is a deck that I think, at least in my imagination, figured was really good into that specific matchup. But maybe it's just a small sample size, so the data doesn't really reflect that too accurately. What else had a really high win rate? It was Altaria and Gourgeist. So I just want to see if any of these matchup spreads are like kind of fraudulent. Okay, so yeah, really good into Magnezone and Bellibolt, really good into Suicune Excalibur because of Chingling and then because of Gourgeist. So it clears both of those matchups pretty well. But actually loses to Altaria Greninja and loses to Hydreigon. So okay, so interesting. So both high, so the high roll Altaria loses to this other stuff, but actually beats Altaria and Gourgeist. So okay. So here's the way that I'm kind of defining that. Altaria Greninja is definitely the stronger of the two decks. It's just probably the strongest deck in the game. But it's like a meta deck, and Altaria Gourgeist is more counter meta. At least it was this weekend, being able to beat Excalibur and Bellibolt with Magnezone and Suicune. So that's interesting, for sure. Very, very interesting. What about this? Was the highest win rate. So let's take a look here. So it beat Suicune Excalibur handedly, again, Chingling and stuff. Beat Magnezone Bellibolt. Like, that's what's surprising to me is, like, how did Altaria Greninja have such a good matchup into Magnezone Bellibolt? Like, that is very surprising to me. This is a deck that typically can beat, Oricorio typically clears Altaria Greninja. So that might be just a weird outlier. I don't know. And then good into Altaria Gourgeist. So kind of winning matchups into effectively everything until you get to Dark Greninja here, which is very slight, and then Gardevoir, which is slight. So I guess this weekend specifically, Altaria Greninja just completely ran away with things. Was by far the best decision. I'm actually surprised it didn't win, but I guess it placed pretty well. It got to grand finals. Get to top 4. Probably would have won grand finals if it ended up facing the other Altaria deck, quite frankly. So that top 4 matchup was pretty important. Also Steelix. Like if Steelix here, if Vayne didn't lose to Altaria Gourgeist, it probably would have dominated either of these decks in finals, or at least had a good shot. So the top 4s were very, very important in terms of finding like determining the results of the tournament, which is very interesting. But it always is that way, I suppose. Very interesting results here in today's video. Very interesting. But let's wrap this up here. I need to unpack and get my life restarted after coming back on vacation. But I did want to just record this video because I've been gone for quite some time and I wanted to get this up yesterday. So if you're watching this, shout out to you. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I appreciate it. Sorry for not uploading yesterday, but we're back and the video should be back as well. So anyway, guys, that's the video. Peace out. See you guys later. Go register. Go register for our tournament this upcoming weekend, the last tournament of the season, Paldean Pinnacle PMPT number 24. It's going to be a whole lot of fun. Don't forget to register. Link down in the description below. All right, guys. Peace out. Have a good one. We'll see you guys later. Bye.